On this mini episode of View the Right Thing, Wes and Desi head to the launch pad to witness NASA and mankind's ultimate achievement as seen through the eyes of its star player, Neil Armstrong, and his personal costs and sacrifices made along his 8-year journey to the moon and back in Damian Chazelle's directed feature, First Man. And now, Wes and Desi take you to the stratosphere in this now playing installment of View the Right Thing.
Welcome back. It's another episode. Another shortened mini episode with my beautiful wife, Desiree. Hi.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good.
We're hanging out. Gonna talk about First Man.
Yeah.
How did you, since it's a mini episode, we'll just jump into it. How'd you feel about First Man?
Worth seeing, yes.
Yeah?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I honestly, I kind of felt like it's definitely more of a drama. It's not like an action film. Like, like sometimes movies about space exploration are much more actiony. Yeah. Even other movies about these specific missions are much more actiony. So if you're like, I'm going to see it in the theater because it's an action film, maybe not 100% necessary. It's really more of a drama,
right? But
still, definitely worth seeing, and very good.
It's very good. I agree. I thought it was a pretty well made, well crafted film. I thought they maybe overutilized some close ups a little too much, but I also think it was done very intentionally for a reason. Yeah. Like I think Damian Chazelle did that to prep us for all of the tight spaces that we were going to be in. You know, the movie essentially opens with close-ups with, all the stuff with his kid, with his daughter. A lot of close-ups like fingers on hair and things like that. Yeah. And I think that was, the kid inside the big machine, the radiation machine. I think that's all sort of to prep us for what he's going to go through throughout the film and how close we're going to be to him. Yeah. There's not a lot of space to maneuver around and I think if they had cheated that too much, it would have been obvious and wouldn't have felt genuine.
Yeah, it's interesting. I felt like this was, like you said, more genuine than like the action film versions of these types of movies, like it was really striking to me how little they can see.
Yeah,
like out.
Their little porthole.
Like their windows are so tiny and like.
Something just dawned on me. We didn't do this on our previous Bohemian Rhapsody. I think probably people knew what the movie was. We didn't actually say what this movie's about. So this movie is First Man, and it stars Ryan Gosling and Claire Foy, Jason Clarke, Kyle Chandler. And it is the telling of the first men on the moon, if you believe that it happened, which I do.
If you're sane.
So this basically tells the story of Neil Armstrong,
and,
among others, but it's really from his perspective.
It's really his perspective. It's really about him.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail us right off the bat. But.
No, that's important.
Yeah, so I walked away feeling really unnerved by a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean...
all of the test flight scenes they just shake you and rattle your brain around and make you feel... It's all chaotic and...
tight and...
There's a lot where you can't see anything.
Dark. That actually, one of the specific things about you being able to not see anything that kind of struck me is like... When you see modern spacecrafts, everything is white inside. And I think it's, I wonder if that's because white reflects light and there's so little light coming from, natural sources. Yeah. That they want to not absorb that. They want to reflect it as much as possible so that you can actually see inside.
I don't know.
All those spacecraft in there look like the inside of a 1930s submarine. Like they're metal.
They look like the underneath of a car.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. And I think probably some of that is true. it's interesting to see the evolution of the crafts that they fly in. So now's the point. I think I'd say real quick. Yes, I think people should see this movie. I think it's probably worth a $10, $15 ticket.
Yeah.
Probably worth a little bit more if you want to see it in IMAX. So yeah, it's worth it. The performances are great.
And interestingly, on the IMAX front, a lot of movies where you see space have this, this grand, like, when you see outer space, it's amazing. And like seeing that on IMAX is really impressive. And I really, on this movie, I felt like they stayed more true to what the astronauts could actually see.
Yeah.
And even shots where you see, where they're outside on the moon and you do see the surface of the moon and the earth, and it's the sky is very dark. It's not filled with stars like sometimes you see in movies, and like the earth is very far away and you can only see a sliver of it, and
I think you kind of hit on it that it's normally you were talking about normally these movies are kind of actiony.
Yeah.
It's not a grand like triumphant thing. Like it is. But they downplay that a little bit in the film. They don't show and there's a little bit of controversy. They don't show the planting of the flag because that's not what this movie's about. Mm-hmm. They show a lot of people's dissension for the space program during the film throughout. The movie takes place over 8-9 years roughly. And over that time, you see glimpses of what's going on. You see protests to the Vietnam War and protests to, civil rights protests and things. Mm-hmm. And they show people's dissension to spending all this money and spending the lives and not on space exploration and not on education or welfare or other programs that could be used. And I thought that sort of attests to this idea that it's not about, this movie wasn't about the triumph. It was a very personal story about not so much the triumph of America, which seemed to be what drove America, right? They were trying to beat the Russians. But it was an emotional film about a guy that was incapable of dealing with loss. And so now we're going to get a little into spoilers. So early on in the film, Neil Armstrong's daughter, young, maybe 3 or 4 years old, dies of cancer. And he's broken by that. And we come to learn that he has been in these test flight programs where lots of pilots have died, and he is becoming accustomed to death but unable to cope with it.
Right, yeah.
And this is a time period, and I think an organization where people who gravitate towards it tend to be ultra macho. There's a scene really early on in the film where he's interviewing to be on the crew for the moon stuff, and it's him and Patrick Fugit's character Elliot C. And they sit down and they're the only guys in suits, and he's like, civilian? Yeah, another civilian. And then you see Jason Clarke's character looks over at them and then looks at one of the other men in uniform and is like, more eggheads, you know? So this idea that you have to be this like really tough, macho, military guy because you're doing like the bravest thing, and quite possibly they were doing this bravest thing of the time period. Yeah, which is interesting. I find interesting too that they highlighted that at that point, because later in the movie, his wife says that he did serve in the military. He wasn't in the military at the time when he applied. Like, he was a civilian then, but he was a veteran. Right. Like, he had been to war. Well, so kind of where I was going with that was you had this idea, this like 1960s idea of what it means to be a man, and we're today still dealing with that. and this idea of having to be ultra macho, you can't cry, you can't show your emotions, you have to keep everything in check, you have to be the breadwinner and all this stuff. And that led to Neil Armstrong being this very reserved, incapable of like carrying conversations on with people.
Yeah.
You know, the reporters ask him really tough questions about, you know, the likelihood of not coming back and being worried about his fellow pilots and things like that. And his only answer can be, we have all intentions of coming back.
Right, yeah.
Because he can't fathom trying to explain the feelings of leaving his family alone.
Yeah, yeah.
And likewise, when he loses, you know, multiple characters throughout the film, people that he's close to, he retreats because he can't communicate.
Yeah, and you know, like he leaves one of the guys in the movie dies, and he leaves the funeral early, and then his wife is riding home with other people, and she's like, does he ever talk about our daughter?
Yeah.
And they're like, no. Does he talk to you about it? And she even says no. Like, right. He can't even talk to his own wife about the death of their child.
Right. And I think that it kind of leads to a really creative and I can only imagine challenging moment, making the sort of the climax of the film, which is the moon landing.
Mm-hmm.
And what he chooses to do. And so again, it is a bigger spoiler than previous.
Yeah.
So warning. In the film, they're asked if they're going to take anything to the moon. So Buzz Aldrin mentions that his wife wants him to take some jewelry to the moon, and why would he deny her this like
bragging rights,
basically? And they ask Armstrong what he would take, and he says, you know, I'd like to take more fuel.
Yeah, he's very business about it.
And yeah, and I think at some point, we don't see when, but at some point he decides to take something, and he takes this bracelet of his daughter's, and he leaves it on the moon. And
I don't think anyone knows that he does it but him.
Yeah, I don't know. It's unclear. They don't really explain.
Yeah.
But what I think was really interesting about that, not just that he did that, because thematically you could surmise from storytelling that would happen, but everything is silent. You know, you do hear the radio transmissions, because I think that's historical. But most of the stuff on the moon, once they step out of the capsule or the landing module, you don't hear anything. And at first I was really bothered by that, because I know they say, like, you know, space is a vacuum and you don't hear things in space. But the reality is, if you're inside a suit, we could hear his breathing.
Yeah, at some point we hit. It was.
You would hear his foot. He would hear his own footsteps through his suit. He would hear the rattling of the strap that's on the staircase through his suit. Like, he would hear vibrations and things, right?
Right.
So at first that really bothered me, but then as the scene progressed and he spent time on the moon and you got this vast openness of nothingness, he's like finally alone. He finally has no voices around him, and he's finally able to like be silent. And it's okay for him to be silent in this moment, and that's when he sort of was allowed to like grieve for the first time. And even when they come back, the last scene of the film is him and his wife, and they're separated still by this piece of glass. There's still it's still silent, you know? And I think that's a really bold, kind of brave thing to do as a filmmaker, to just let the situation live in the silence.
Yeah. It's definitely something I noticed too, is that silence. And like the other thing, when they land on the moon, the other thing that really struck me was like that landing module, compared to, you know, what we see now, that landing module looks like a tin can with tin foil wrapped around it.
It looks like something built out of an erector set.
Yeah, and there's so much foil. Like, I'm sure it's like, insulated. And
I think today they use the foil, though,
yeah,
right?
I think they do too. But it just struck me as really funny to, like, it looks like a test thing. It doesn't look like something that should have actually gone on to the into outer space and onto the moon.
Yeah. It's funny because I think about the foil and stuff, and I remember when they show the shuttle where they like break it apart and they turn it around and then they connect back, they redock with the module. I was noticing things like foil wrapped around hoses and stuff, and I was thinking, this looks so different from the Gemini stuff, or the Gemini as they pronounced it in the movie. It looks so different from that technology that over the course of 4 years that they had figured out a bunch of things. And I wish a little part of me wishes that we gotten to experience some of that, because Neil Armstrong was an engineer, and so I feel like I missed out a little bit on his work as an engineer on the projects. But
yeah, I mean, they definitely they show him taking a lot of notes and writing things down and being very like engaged when the teacher is talking in certain but it is very like you're not connected to it, like it's
right.
It's sort of ancillary. But the one thing I did think was really interesting that they I think sort of very briefly touched on about his engineering mind, that sort of analytical, mathematical type of mindset, is that he has a whole notebook he's writing everything down about his daughter being sick, like how she's reacting to the chemotherapy,
right?
Like when they do the chemotherapy, like what different things are happening. Like, it's not emotional, it's not a journal, it's scientific. It's he's tracking it in a mathematical, scientific way.
Yeah. Well, there's a really that I loved that moment when they go up to test the docking for the first time, and it's just him and one other guy, and they've missed the point. Like they have overshot the point that they were supposed to arrive at, and he's got his journal and he's working it all out, and the guy's talking to him and he's like, he's like, shut up, I need to figure this out.
He like literally tells him to stop talking. Like, he's like, I need to solve this so that we can figure this out,
Yeah.
Excuse me.
There was the music was really interesting to me.
It was very interesting. It was not space epic, huge orchestral.
It wasn't Harry Gregson Williams like Armageddon
right,
style.
Yeah.
Like
it was drama. It was drama music.
It was drama music, and it was a little like experimental, and sometimes it was like pretty standard film score. I thought like the main theme was pretty standard, but definitely like some of the space stuff was. And at first it kind of bothered me that there was this theremin in there. And I was like, oh, it's so like such a cheesy, spacey thing to do to include the theremin. But then I learned that Neil Armstrong was a big fan of the theremin. So now I'm kind of like, okay, so it was there for a really good reason. And it does work. It just, as somebody who has seen that trope or heard that trope a lot, it really stuck out to me. But knowing those things, they did a lot of really interesting things to make this movie. They tried to be as scientifically accurate as possible. I think they tried to be as historically accurate as possible.
Yeah.
The fire in the Apollo.
10, I think it's the 10.
I don't remember. It's the one where they were doing. It was pretty early in.
It was like the plug out test.
It was the plug out test.
And Neil and I don't know, one of the other guys are at the White House.
Yes, they're at the White House.
They're not there.
I don't know if it was. I can't remember. I think it was earlier than the 10, because I know they did a test before 11. But I thought that was handled really well. I thought it was abrupt, and it was not gratuitous.
And
I think,
but it's like heartbreaking still.
It's so heartbreaking, and I think the choice to show the exterior of the tin can when the moment happens was everything that you needed to say about it, about the danger of this and how catastrophic it is when it goes wrong.
And how quickly I mean, it was minutes, barely.
Oh no, seconds, I think.
Yeah,
I mean,
but I mean, like from the time that they're like a fire has broken out to that.
Oh, I think it was seconds. Yeah, I think it's like 30 seconds. Short. Yeah, it was.
Excuse me.
Jarring in the best ways.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I fall on that. I think. I mean, it's early right now, but we're sort of in the. Getting, in 2 months, they're going to start saying, here are the nominations for...
Right, yeah.
in a month, they're going to be talking about Golden Globes. So,
yeah.
How did you feel about this? Do you think that you see any awards coming for this?
It's interesting because I think that a lot of times actors get awards for being very emotional and very dramatic, and I think that Ryan Gosling did a really good job being true to how I think he might have been, like how Neil Armstrong may have actually been, which is extremely reserved. Like he gets mad a few times, but like he contains it, and I think he did a really good job of showing him sort of struggle internally.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Visually, you understand what Neil Armstrong is going through just by looking at him. And
right.
You're hitting on a really, really great point.
Yeah. There's not some like long monologue where he blows up and I think that those types of performances are more easily identifiable as
right.
Award performances. But I think that this is almost harder. I think.
Yeah, and I as far as delivering dialogue, I point probably to the scene with his children where he explains, they sit down at the dinner table and he explains that he might not come back. That's I think a really great scene where somebody's trying to say so very little. And you're right, I think normally you would have big long speech about it.
Yeah.
And he would, in any other movie, he would tell a story that a kid would understand, and instead he's just
not who he is.
Matter of fact about it.
He just is. Yeah, he doesn't even want to have a conversation with them at all. Like,
right.
And I think that
Claire
Foy, like her monologue to him about him needing to tell them, is definitely very powerful, and it's probably a little more in line with those sort of more identifiable. Like, they could definitely get an award for this. Like,
I wanted a little more Claire Foy. That's probably my biggest critique for the film, is that you get a sense of what the wives go through by like one scene, 2 scene, maybe after the fact that, once people start dying, you get another little taste of it, but you don't really get to, and I know the movie's not really exactly about her, it's more about him.
Yeah.
But I would have liked to have seen her have more to do than, and I know it's the 60s, but more to do than just be a mom.
Yeah.
I wish we would have got to see more dialogue from her, because when she delivers it, she's so convincing, and she's got a little bit of that transatlantic thing going on, and she's just very engaging to watch. And when they lose contact with Neil on the test flight, the docking test, and she goes in and talks to Kyle Chandler's character.
Yeah.
I thought that performance was excellent, but I was like, it's so short. There's just not enough meat there. And I was really hoping that this was going to be a sort of a breakout, like not a breakout thing for her, because she's already a Golden Globe Emmy winner.
Yeah.
But I was just hoping that this would be an opportunity for her to maybe get nominated for an award. Yeah. I'm not sure there was enough there for her to do it.
It's interesting because, like, she does have that scene, and then she has the scene where she, explains to Neil that he has to talk to the children before he leaves. Like, he can't just leave without saying anything. And it's interesting because we never see her grieve their child's loss either. But I think that's because Neil never sees it. He is like...
That's a really good point.
He's like, I'm going back to work, like... And he won't deal with it, so he doesn't see her deal with it either.
Yeah.
You know, but...
That's a really great point.
So even if he doesn't see it, though, I still think it would have been okay for us to see it, you know, without him there. Like,
yeah.
I think that could have been an opportunity, you know, for her to have a little bit more to do in that story.
Yeah.
You know?
I don't know if Damian Chazelle will get any kind of recognition for this. I wonder. I think he did a fantastic job as the director. I think it's special in a lot of ways. I think he made a lot of really bold choices that aren't easy to make. Shooting so close in confined spaces, showing a lot of black, choosing to have scenes just be silent. I think those are really bold decisions. But it also limits his scope. So I don't know where people are going to fall on that. I think there's also like a bunch of, you know, there's some really, really great directors out this year. Alfonso Cuarón's got a new movie coming out, and there's a bunch of first-time directors, and there's Boots Riley, who did Sorry to Bother You, and there's just there's going to be a lot of competition this year, so I'm not quite sure where people are going to fall on that. I won't be surprised if he does.
Yeah.
But I also absolutely won't be surprised if he doesn't. I think it could sneak away from him because he made the right decisions. The bold decisions were the right call for this film. But sadly, that could be also the thing that keeps him from getting an award. But
yeah, it's interesting, too, because, like I said, you know, this isn't... A lot of times, like, when you see, like, Armageddon or other films of that nature, they are these, you know, huge, sweeping vistas of outer space. And I almost think that when you do get to see it in this film... like when they get that glimpse out the window of the horizon, or, you know, the moon right there, you know,
right.
It's almost more impactful because you want more. Like you're barely getting it, and like you're waiting for it. Like, you know, like
it also goes to show like how much work goes into getting so little out of it, you know. Right. It's like you're just struggling to attain this thing that you can barely glimpse through a small window, which is tough.
Yeah, but like I said, I think that when you do get, like, when he is finally on the moon
is like incredible.
Like, it feels so much more impactful.
Yeah, you have this really strong appreciation for it, and I felt like I don't know. I was like, it feels like this must be what the moon really is like.
Yeah.
You really get that feeling. Also, you know, you were talking about like movies like Armageddon and stuff. I want to point to like two movies that are a little bit more grounded in reality than Armageddon. The Right Stuff and Apollo 13. Yeah. But especially The Right Stuff, you know, the famous shot, which they did, and I mean, you've seen it in a whole bunch of movies and TV shows, but even Armageddon kind of mimicked this. But the slow motion shot of the heroes coming out toward the camera, walking towards the shuttle, you know, that's not what this movie was. Right. In fact, this movie was two guys going out alone into a space shuttle, afraid to walk up to it. Right, you know, you can see the fear and the trepidation in his eyes when he goes into the Gemini module. So, in a lot of ways, it's like almost the exact opposite. I think, kind of what to your point. Yeah. So, but yeah, so I liked the movie a lot, and I definitely recommend it.
Yeah, I definitely would too. There was something I wanted to talk about. I
can't remember in a podcast. It's gone. Oh no! There was something. There was one little factoid that I learned that I really liked. Was remember? There's a scene in the film before they get into the Apollo. I think it's like the morning of, and they're having breakfast, and it's just like super quiet, and they're just eating, and there's a guy scratching away on paper. He's drawing them. that guy is the son of the artist who drew them that morning, and he's playing his father in that scene.
Oh, that's cool.
I thought that was like a very sweet thing to include in the film. So, well,
I think no. So sorry,
you remembered it.
What I was
oh, fantastic!
Okay,
Let's do it.
So I was going to talk about again going back to the scene where he's interviewing to be part of the program, the NASA program. Like he's already a pilot. He's already doing test flights and things, but NASA specifically, is interviewing the people for the Gemini.
Yeah. The civilian versus the veterans.
In that interview, they ask him why he thinks it's important. And that was like maybe the most striking, like, personal thing in the film to me. Like, there is that they do touch on sort of that dissent of the public and saying like, why are we spending all this money to go out into outer space? We don't need to, and all this kind of things. And he talked about how it gives us a new perspective. Even if we go to the moon and we don't find anything useful, like him seeing the atmosphere and saying like it's so small compared to the Earth, like.
And I think that's backed up later in the film too.
Yeah.
You're right. So prior to that moment, you have sort of the him versus the military guy, Jason Clarke's character, and you sort of have this. You sort of get the feeling that they're going to be rivals, and in reality, they end up becoming very close friends, and their wives are very close friends.
Yeah.
And there's a moment in the film when they're out on a walk together, and he's talking about how his son is gaining a new perspective.
Right.
And I think that's that justification that Neil Armstrong has or needed, or the confirmation that he needed that what they were doing was worth it. Right. And at the end of the film, even though, again, you mentioned the descent, at the end of the film, you hear Jason Clarke, Ed White's character, Ed White, talking about why space exploration after he's died. And then also you hear JFK talking about space exploration and talking about like why climb Everest, why do anything, because we can and we should, because it can change lives, and we've gained a lot by space exploration. So
we got Tang, so
Tang.
No, obviously way more.
We did not see them drink any Tang.
No, we did not.
What the heck? The heck, filmmakers?
We barely see them. He has like some weird like bag of some kind of food.
I'm guessing
or
it was
meat gravy, something.
Yeah, meat fat. Yeah. I don't know.
But that's like the only time we even see it, and that's like one of those sort of tropes of space movies where they always see like there's some bubble of liquid floating in the whatever, and and it's. I don't think it's necessary in this movie.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I
agree.
I think they did just the whole movie they did such a good job with. And, there's another thing I was just thinking of that reminded me, seeing the evolution of, like, the buildings they're in at NASA.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the first building where they do that,
of course you noticed
the spin, they get in the thing that
the
spins them around.
Thing, yeah.
And then they all go to the bathroom to throw up. That bathroom looks like a 50-year-old cruddy, dirty garage bathroom.
Like a hangar
that's
or something,
it's so gross and like old and dirty.
Oh yeah, the bathroom, yeah.
And then like later they're in the bathroom again and it's clearly like cleaner and newer and like it's just interesting to see that evolution too.
Yeah, well, and then the center that they quarantine them, he goes to stay overnight at before the Apollo 11 launch, and he's got like a little room, when they quarantine him, he's got like a painting and some of his belongings are in there and his suitcases in there, and it's just a very strange and surreal thing coming from where they started.
Right? Yeah.
So
sorry, that was just something I noticed. It
was a good
throw in there.
Good observation. All right, I think that's it for this episode, this mini episode. We're gonna be back with more mini episodes. Hopefully, we're gonna soon be talking about the movie Overlord. We're hoping to talk about the film A Private War, and then we've got the full length episodes. We've got Beautiful Boy come with our friend Alexis. I'll be speaking with her. So keep listening, and we will see you next time. Bon cinema.